Do you think AI steals art? Well, if you do, let me tell you why you're wrong. Well, first, let me tell you how AI understands art. When the AI is given an image to train on, it'll go through a process of adding noise to it until the image is entirely noise. The model then trains on how to reduce the noise from the image to get back to the original image. During training, it starts at a random point in the chain. Then it predicts what noise was added to the image. It'll then remove that noise, add most of it back, and then it repeats this process until you've gotten back to the original image. After training, what we have is an AI that has learned to denoise an image. Now, what this means is that the AI is not just taking your image and overlaying it or mixing it with another image. When you ask for an image of a car, the AI is taking a noise map and is searching for larger shapes that might be the outline of a car. It then removes some of the noise, adds some back, and repeats the process. Eventually, the AI is able to find finer details instead of just the larger shapes. And it knows what these shapes are because it's analyzed thousands of images that have been tagged to have cars in them. So it's not taking the image of a car and altering it, it's taking a noise map and trying to find a car within that noise map using the collective data of what cars are. This raises the question, how is this different from you being influenced by the designs of Ford or Tesla or Ferrari or any other car when you go to draw a car? Unless you went out of your way to just throw out everything you know about car design, you didn't design that car from scratch. It's an amalgamation of all the cars you've seen throughout your life and the design philosophies that someone else came up with. Yet no one is going to argue that your car in your painting is 32% Ford Fiesta, therefore you stole it. In fact, everything you know about car design is taken from the practical engineering that someone else came up with. Why does this understanding go out the window the moment we start talking about a computer doing the same thing? If you take the argument of the artists who say it's because it can take a small part of your image without your consent, or it can recreate your style, using that logic, you can't draw cars anymore. Those are designs taken by other people without their consent. You wouldn't know what a car looks like if it wasn't for the thousands of people who got paid to design cars, and you're taking their designs without their consent. This is why I don't think there's a difference between a person being inspired and an AI being trained on a large data set that happens to include your work. What about being trained on someone's style? Would that be considered stealing? Well, I would say it's not.
Okay, stop the tape. This point didn't come out the way I wanted it to, so let's be a little more nuanced about it. On face value, a person copying someone's style is not stealing. And if an AI is not overtly copying your images and is instead just recreating the patterns of your art style, that is also not stealing. However, we run into a problem with a lot of art style models called overtraining. This happens when you have too many instances of a single image in your training data. To make it real simple, let's assume you're training a model and you use this picture of Superman in the dataset. No big deal, because unless you're specifically targeting this one image with your prompt, you are not going to randomly recreate this image of Superman. Now let's say instead of just using one instance of this image, you have 700 of them. Well, now if you target these images with your prompt, you might just end up getting the exact same image out. Or worse, having a prompt that has nothing to do with Superman taking the pose, style, or composition from this image. This is why many AI models that aim to recreate art styles straight up copy original artworks. If they are using generic models, the prompts are too focused on a small set of images. And if they're using a model trained on an art style, that model had poor training data. This isn't a fault on the AI, it's a fault on the people making the AI or using the AI. And that is a clear distinction. If these models were made properly so that they don't copy the original artworks, it should be totally fine.
And this brings us to the main issue with AI that no one actually wants to talk about. The only objection people have to it is that it's either a computer or it's taking their job. And that's about as far as it goes. I've watched all the videos, I've read all the Reddit threads, I've read some of your twit-longers, and I have not yet seen a good, logical argument outside of it's a computer. People will talk about how AI art is soulless, but I don't like that argument either.
I gotta cut you off again, bro. You're making another point we need to better articulate. Let's actually indulge this. Let's say that there is factually zero soul behind every piece of AI art. The question then becomes, how is this a problem? I would argue that it is not a problem. It is totally valid to enjoy art at face value. I know plenty of people are going to say that this is counter to the entire point of art. And I would counter by pointing out all the passionate craftsmen who would say the same thing about their craft. There's a cobbler out there somewhere who would say that every shoe they make is an expression of themselves, and that every pair not only holds the feet of its wearer, but the soul of the artist. And that cobbler wouldn't be wrong in saying that. On the flip side, it's not wrong for me to think shoes are just something to protect my feet from the ground. You are right to care about the human expression side of art, and I'm right to say that not all art has to be enjoyed that way.
To prove that the difference is only that it's a computer, let's take a look at photo bashing. Now, photo bashing is actually just taking other people's art and editing them and stitching them together, which is more stealing than what AI does. However, for most people, it's seen as a legitimate form of art. It's odd to me that once it's a computer that does something far more complex than photo bashing, that all of a sudden it's stealing. Another argument that seems valid is that AI requires people to make art for it to train on.
On the surface, this sounds like a completely valid critique of AI. However, think about how you learned art.
You probably didn't learn the intricacies of shading and perspective on your own. Most likely you were taught by other people who learned before you. If you weren't directly taught by someone, you probably looked at the way other people made art, studied their sketches and shading, following tutorials online for very specific things you wanted to learn. You would not be as good of an artist if you had to learn everything entirely by yourself. I'm self-taught as a 3D artist. Do you know what that means? That means I looked at how other people's models worked, I followed videos on YouTube, and I watched people sculpt and listened to their thought process. I required other people to teach me how to do the art that I do. I could not have figured that all out on my own. Am I a fucking robot? I required other people to teach me how to be an artist, and most likely, you did too. Once again, what's the difference? Why do we say it's okay for people to require other people's art to make art, but then say it's wrong for an AI to require other people's art to make art? As AI gets more advanced, more artists will lose their jobs. That's just a fact. People who work for corporations who make soulless art, well, they're going to be replaced really soon. And a lot of personal art is going to be made by AI instead of paid for. But this doesn't mean AI will be the end of handmade art. I know this because people still care about things that are made by hand. And to prove it, I'm going to take you on a little road trip. Welcome to the Sherwood Forest Fair. This is a Renaissance festival here in Texas, and nothing here makes any sense to actually buy. Anything you could buy here, you could find for at least half the price on Amazon. So why do people spend thousands of dollars every year buying stuff at the Renaissance Festival? This is because the people who come here and buy stuff don't want things that are mass-produced in a factory in China. They care about the products being handmade. One of the craziest examples of this is Angel Sword. These are professionally handmade swords that are actually combat ready, which, ask yourself, why do those things matter? Who's getting into sword fights? Yet people are willing to pay through the nose to have one of these. There are people who have made too much money selling soap here. These dragon puppets, they've made more money than Kanye. Look around at the people you see on the daily. Most of what they own is mass-produced in a factory. Most people don't have the time to care deeply about the things you care deeply about. Most people will be fine with their mass-produced clothes, mass-produced food, mass-produced shoes. Most people just don't care. But some people want a watch that was handmade in Switzerland, and they will pay so much money to have it. You as an artist will not be able to compete with the mass-produced products on Amazon. You will have to find a spot in the market that appreciates your handcrafted products like all the artists have here. There are leatherworkers, blacksmithers, painters, sculptors, hell, even professional jousters that can make a living nowadays because of places like this. You will always be able to find a spot in the market. It may be harder, but once you find those people, they will be willing to pay you more than you're being paid now. And they'll probably care a lot more than the people you're currently dealing with. If you're still worried about the future of the art market, ask yourself why you became an artist. Do you care about the artistry of it? Or are you just providing a product for a customer? If you are making soulless art that is just a product for the end user, you will be replaced very soon. But if you're making something that people can care about, something they can find deeper meaning within and resonate with, you will be totally fine in the future because people are not just there for the end product.
Bucky, he's unlucky. His only friend is a ducky. Poor Bucky, he's unlucky. Only friend is a ducky. That was actually good.